Herzliya Conference 2012. Herzliya Conference 2012. Special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts on IDC Radio.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Davis. You are the Vice President of the IDC Herzliya and the head of the Rafael Recanati International School at the IDC.
Right.
This is the 12th annual conference, Herzliya Conference. How is this conference different than any of the others?
Well, firstly, in most of the other conferences, we never had IDC Radio. So we're glad to have IDC Radio, and we're glad to be on board, and hopefully one of these days you're going to be broadcasting with such a frequency that people in Nicosia, Cyprus will hear us as well. And first of all, it's really great to know that IDC Radio exists, broadcasts in Hebrew and in English, and so that's the good news. The other good news is that we've had 12 conferences, 12 Herzliya conferences. I would say this conference is a little different. You can kind of tell by the name of the conference, which is In the Eye of the Storm. Someone says there are some storms around here, and we might be in the eye of some of them. And when you take a look at the situation today in Egypt, and you take a look at the situation in Iran, and in Iraq, and in Syria, and in Lebanon, and in Hamastan, if you take a look at those different regions, you see that there's a huge change in status quo compared to what there was last year at this time, for all kinds of dynamics which have been taking place in the Middle East, in this immediate region. And of course, the other thing which didn't exist as much as it does now is the economic situation. One can say that we're also in the eye of the economic storm, because Israel is a country which exports a lot of goods to Europe. And Europe is facing a major economic crisis. We had George Papandreou, the former prime minister of Greece, speak here in a very eloquent way, in a very courageous way, discussing what the citizens of Greece have to face in order to make up the economic problems which they have there, and what's going to happen to the euro, and so on and so forth, and a whole bunch of other global impacted situations which didn't exist in the first 11 conferences, but do exist in this 12th conference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Davis, you travel around campuses in the world. You visit campuses, and you develop relationships with many academic institutions. From your experience, is Israel delegitimized in campuses around the world?
I think Israel is attacked, and it is delegitimized on a number of campuses overseas. It's also delegitimized by countries in the United Nations. It's delegitimized by the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations. In many ways, we're fighting a battle with one hand tied behind our backs, because we're democratic. We believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You've got total freedom of press in this country, and everything there is to hear and to say about this country is always going to be broadcast all over the place, and that's the way we would love it to be, since we are the only democracy in the Middle East in spite of Arab Spring. We're still the only real democracy in the Middle East. And so, therefore, we're much more open to criticism. So that's a challenge in that kind of an atmosphere to represent a country which has challenging problems that it has to face vis-a-vis the Palestinians, vis-a-vis problems inside Israel itself. We have some fundamentalist problems in Israel with some of the ultra-Orthodox in this country. We have problems with Israeli Arabs in this country, problems that need to be solved. We have problems with, as I said, our Palestinian neighbors that need to be solved. And so it makes us very, very vulnerable to criticism, especially also because I believe Israel is the #1 country in the world with the most per capita number of international correspondents. So we are in the international communications eye of the storm, so to speak. So I think we have to be very, very clever about really discussing the raison d'etre of Israel and what we all believe in. And what we all believe in, most of us, we believe in democratic values, we believe in liberalism, we believe in humanism. Many of us also believe in a free enterprise economy. I think those are many of the things which we need to present overseas that should challenge to do that on campuses. One way of making sure that some people get the right idea about Israel is to have as many of the students on campus come and visit Israel. So if you have a program like Birthright, which brings tens of thousands of people here and many of them visit IDC Herzliya, that's one way of having people understand that Israel is not everything they thought it was because they happened to see some video clip from somewhere. So it's a huge challenge. IDC, by the way, is trying to do something about that challenge. The School of Communications here, for example, has a No Camels website, which is producing fantastic information about Israel, innovative information about Israel, about Israeli science, about Israeli medicine, about Israeli culture, about the beauties of what goes on in this country other than the political challenges which we face. And by the way, tens of thousands of people are going into No Camels. We have a program on this campus called the Ambassadors Club, where we're actually teaching a lot of the students here the do's and don'ts about how to make the case for Israel. We've got a David project on this campus that does the same thing. It's difficult to explain everything that goes on around here. We're not going to win every single battle, but my attitude is if we're going to lose some battles, as we say in basketball, let's lose by just a few points, and let's not get blown out of the match. Let's score a few three-pointers here, because I think we have a lot to say about this country. We need to be totally honest about ourselves. It's fine for us to also criticize this country. We also make mistakes. But I think the fact that we can criticize this country is also part of our democratic values.
Now let's talk about the international students here at the IDC. You had the international school. Why do you think international students come to Israel? What is it that we have to offer them?
Well, I think we have a lot to offer, especially at IDC Herzliya and especially at the Rafael Recanati International School, because there are a whole bunch of students around the world who have been to Israel on any number of programs in high school, or visited Israel here with their parents for a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, or have relatives in the country. There are hundreds of thousands of Israelis, by the way, who live overseas, who have got brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and grandparents in this country. And so there are a lot of folks out there who know a heck of a lot about Israel and would actually like to come and possibly do a bachelor's degree here or an MA here. So what we've done at the Rafael Recanati International School is we teach a whole bunch of subjects such as communications or psychology or business or government diplomacy and strategy. We teach these programs in English. And there can be nothing nicer than coming to a university in Israel like IDC, which teaches these programs for BA in English, which also has some Israelis in the classes, and which is surrounded by other Israelis who are studying here in Hebrew. So we have a student body here of 6,500 students, and about a quarter of those students are actually from the international school. So when an international student comes here, they're also getting a tremendous education just by learning from students from 82 different countries. And when you walk into the cafeteria of this university, you hear German, and you hear Belgian, not Belgian, but actually sometimes even Flemish. But you sometimes hear French with a Belgian accent. You hear French with a French accent. You hear French with a Geneva Swiss accent. You hear German here with a Swiss accent, sometimes with an Austrian accent. You hear all kinds of East European languages here. You see people here from the United States and Canada. You've got Brits on campus, South Americans. There's Spanish and Portuguese. And what I'm trying to say is that above and beyond the classroom situation where you're being taught in English, in every given situation where you're analyzing a situation, you're going to be hearing from the national characters of tens of different countries in those classes. You're going to be hearing their opinions. Sometimes the professors themselves are learning from the students. So it's not only the academic syllabus that they're studying, they're also learning from other students who come from all of these different countries around the world, not to mention all of the different extracurricular activities which we have here on campus, which are too long to list, whether they are the debating team or sports or working for the radio station here, and a million other things that students can do which would not shame a great Ivy League university or some great private college in New England. Okay, we have all of those things here on campus, including a Hillel, which had a Thanksgiving dinner and which has Friday night dinners. So you've got everything you could ask for on a campus at a university in Israel where a lot of these folks would like to be, but they're able to come into a user-friendly situation, possibly one of the only universities in the country that has that kind of an atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. I teach in one of these international classes here at the Communications School at the IDC, and it is quite interesting.
So are you having fun?
I'm having a lot of fun.
That's the main thing.
I hope the students are having fun.
You see, if you can achieve Zionism and have fun at the same time, it's like being in a summer camp for the rest of your life. And since I'm a graduate of Camp Ramah in California, and I love the camp so much that I decided to make Aliyah, for me, after making Aliyah, this country is like one big summer camp, and that's why I'm here. I love the Zionism of it, and I love being part of a Jewish state. And I think that the Raphael Recanati International School and IDC play a tremendous role in that state. So I'm having fun here when I get up every morning, so that's a good thing.
Well, following that, you work with students from all over the world, different age ranges, different countries, different backgrounds. What do you think of today's generation of students?
I think today's generation of students is a very, very committed generation. A very, very committed generation. I'm finding many, many students at IDC Herzliya who are serving in elite combat units, who are spending a lot of time in reserves. I myself serve in reserves at the old age of 62 and have 4 students from IDC under my command in reserves, which is even more fun. And I see many students coming here from overseas, by the way, who at the end of their studies here wish to join the IDF. And so I find them to be much more computer savvy than we ever were, much more Facebook savvy than we ever were, because we never had Facebook. We used to just have rock and roll in the 1960s, you know, and we used to use records, and we didn't have any of these iPhones and stuff, and these kids are much more high-tech oriented, but they're no less Zionist, and they no less care about Israel or the Jewish people. And there are non-Jews who study here who also care about Israel, and some of them come from Singapore and from Germany and from other places. We have Christian students amongst us, and we have Muslim students amongst us. We've got Muslim students here from Darfur and from Eritrea and from Somalia. In fact, we have one Eritrean student who is graduating the School of Communications this year. He was a refugee. He came into Israel without any family, somehow made a living for himself, and he's finishing his degree here in communications. So all of those people care about Israel. And I find the average student here very, very committed. I find them extremely high-tech oriented. And usually when I ask one of these students to promote the program, I say, just get on Facebook, show a photo of yourself climbing a Masada or eating in the cafeteria, and tell them what you're doing here. And that's going to be a much better way of marketing this university than having some old schmendrick like me talk about it.
Why do you think the non-Jews come to Israel to study, or come to the IDC to study? What appeals to them?
Well, some of the non-Jews who came here had romantic interludes with Israelis. So they wanted to be with their boyfriend and their girlfriend. And there's nothing that can stop love. So some of them came here, and they love it here. There are others who came here out of fascination. I have a number of German students who are non-Jewish, and they've heard of the Holocaust, and they've heard of World War II, and they've studied some of these things. And they find it fascinating to come here and see what this is all about, how out of the ashes this state was created. And they find that interesting. I find speaking with them to be interesting. I have a number of students here from India and from China who came here because they were looking for the startup nation and wanted to study in what I call Israel's Silicon Valley, as opposed to Silicon Valley, because surrounding us here in Herzliya are a whole bunch of high-tech companies which attract people to come here. For example, our MBA, which has a fantastic entrepreneurial track, which Dr. Oren Zuckerman runs. A lot of people come here because they want to see how the startup nation, national character of Israel actually exists, and that's a lot of fun for them to come here. All of these things, I think, attract individuals who wish to come here. There are some non-Jews who have decided to come here because they wanted to become Jewish. They decided that they wanted to convert to Judaism. Something swayed them in that direction, and they find their first step in the process. If it's IDC Herzliya or this university, they find that it's a user-friendly step for them. So you have different folks from different strokes, and all of them are coming here for different reasons. But it's exciting that they're coming here, and it's exciting that we have a non-Jewish population here as well, because it makes it much more heterogeneous, and it makes it much more international as well, and it makes it much more democratic and universalistic and liberal, and those are the things that we like.
Now, looking forward, how can you sum up this Herzliya conference, and what can we anticipate from the next one?
Well, how can I summarize this Herzliya conference? Well, there are a lot of things in this conference where people are saying there's a writing on the wall here, which we have to be careful of. We have to be careful in terms of a possible world recession economically, and it's interesting that this conference took place right after Davos. So many people who were at Davos, such as our illustrious president, Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres delivered a speech here, having just been at Davos, and Stanley Fischer spoke here. and many of the other top Israeli economists and international global experts. The chairman of the World Bank was here. So hearing what all of them had to say, first of all, Israel looks like an island of normalcy economically compared to a lot of the other countries in the world. But we have to be very, very careful to make sure that the Israeli economy doesn't lose it. And we shouldn't take anything for granted. And Stanley Fischer was speaking about the challenges in Israeli society of getting more of the Arab population to work here and to get more of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population to work here. And all of the outreach we can do with those interest groups to make sure that they are working here, because those two interest groups have the highest population rate in this country. And we need them to be productive Israeli citizens and be part of the labor force. In spite of the fact that we're number 18 in the OECD, and in spite of the fact that we have a much, much higher per capita income in this country than we ever had, and that our GDP is going places, and economic growth compared to other countries is going places in this country, we still have a lot of homework to do in this country. And we should take nothing for granted. So that was something that I saw the writing on the wall from the economic point of view, from the strategic and military point of view. When you just take a look around us and see what's going on, you understand why we have to have a strong Israeli army in the Negev, which we did not have to have a number of years ago. That there's a need to build a very, very good security fence between us and Egypt to keep out all kinds of individuals who may want to visit us illegally or who may wish to come and perpetrate terrorism in this country, and that we need a security fence exactly the kind that we have along our border with the possible future Palestinian state here, which we know helps keep everybody happy as far as lowering the amount of terrorism which takes place in this country. We see a situation in Iran, which we have to look at in a very, very focused way. The state of Israel has to be in a position where it needs to protect itself, or even possibly be in a position where it needs to defend itself by even launching an attack possibly sometime in the future. We have to be ready for that. We would prefer never to have to be in that position. We prefer that the world should create a boycott situation of Iran so that the leaders of Iran are on their knees, so that the economic situation in Iran is so bad, hopefully, that the Iranians themselves will come to the conclusion that it's not worth their while to continue developing nuclear weapons and threaten the state of Israel with it. And it might be a situation where some people in Iran may get the strength to foment rebellion within Iran if we're able to change things through the various aspects of the boycott. But it's a very, very, very difficult balancing situation, and we discussed that in the conference as well. We also discussed the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with Syria, and the fact that the Syrians right now may be moving chemical and biological possibilities for warfare to the Hezbollah, or possibly sending over to the Hezbollah many more sophisticated missiles, which maybe the Hezbollah don't have at this stage because of the situation in Syria. So we find ourselves being challenged by all of this, and I would say that at this conference the situation looks even a little more wary than at the last conference. It doesn't mean that we need to panic, but it means that we have to be ready for anything. So we have to be a startup nation which has a fantastic economy and which takes in fantastic students from overseas, and at the same time we need to be in a situation where we know how to protect ourselves and defend ourselves on a strategic basis and not let our guard down and make sure that we're vigilant.
And what can we anticipate for next year?
For next year, I anticipate only good things. I anticipate that the economic situation in this country will continue to be good. I anticipate a situation where the world will come together about Iran. And it won't be Israel versus Iran, but it'll be the NATO countries versus Iran. And that maybe China and India will join in as well, because any terrorist harboring country based on Islamic radicalism, in the end, is not good for Russia and is not good for India either. Both the Russians and the Indians have problems with Islam, so does China. And those three countries need to face the music when it comes to Iran. And I think the Russians need to join the Security Council of the United Nations when it comes to Iran and when it comes to Syria. And I think it would be a very, very good idea for the Chinese and for the Indians to join in the oil boycott, because radical Islam is not good for China, especially in the Xinjiang province of China, which has an Islamic majority, and where there have been suicide bombings in the past. It's certainly not good for India, which has an indigenous Islamic population within India and has been suffering from tremendous terrorism harbored by people inside Pakistan who come in and perpetrate terrorism inside India. So I think we need to take all of those things into consideration. Basically, I'm an optimist. Just as I believe that Maccabi Tel Aviv will defeat the Cantu team this evening in Italy in order for Maccabi Tel Aviv to make it to the Final Four, I also believe that everything else will be good in the future, so that the 13th conference, where I hope we get to speak again, because I enjoyed speaking with you, let's hope that we'll have fun at that conference as well.
Well, on this optimistic note, thank you very much for joining us, Jonathan Davis. Enjoy the rest of the evening.